10-minute Torah. All right, I'm doing this a little different. I usually like to do this off the cuff, but instead I spent some time writing things down. So, as I was reading the portion this week, I started to wonder, who was this Abraham? Who was this man whom God chose to be the great father of nations, whose offspring is uncountable? Why was he chosen by God? What set him apart? And he is, why is he this good representation of who we should be in our walk with God? So I gathered details and outlined who Abraham was according to the Word. I want to deliver that to you in a way fitting such a great man, and also to encourage you to read the Torah portion so you can see for yourself. We will certainly discuss him and his decisions in Torah study. And hopefully many of you can make it, though I encourage all of you, even if you are unable to come to Torah study, to read the portions each week. A good time is as you relax on Shabbat evening, Friday night. But any time really will work. You don't have to read it all at once either. What can happen, though, is the Lord can use what you read to speak to you even in your day-to-day life. He often opens the scripture to me as I go from day to day, and it brings a personal meaning and purpose in my life that I'd never have otherwise. So please join us in studying these portions each week, and now join me as I share who I discovered when I read lecha this week. The Abraham was a remarkable man, but also a relatable one. Let's get closer to Abraham for a moment, though. As it says in Genesis 13:16, I will make your seed like the dust of the earth, so that if one could count the dust of the earth, then your seed could also be counted. And then in Genesis 15, verse 5, he took him outside and said, look up now at the sky and count the stars, if you are able to count them. And then he said to him, so shall be your seed. This is curious. How can a person have that many offspring? And actually, I've done a bit of research, and you too can even do your own math and see. See, every person has 2 parents and 4 grandparents and 8 great-grandparents and, I don't have that many fingers, 16 great-great-grandparents, and so on and so forth. If you go back about 30 generations, that's roughly 800 to 900 years, your potential ancestor count exceeds 1 billion. That's far more than the world population at that time. Do the math yourself. Pull out a calculator. Just multiply by 2. Just keep going. About 30 generations. See, Abraham lived around 4,000 years ago. That's about 150 generations. So even a tiny number of his descendants spreading outward would over time make it almost certain that his lineage appears somewhere in nearly every population on earth. And we know that much more than a tiny number of his descendants spread over the earth. His descendants are vast. It's honestly likely, and of course biblically accurate, that Abraham's descendants are vast across the earth. I personally believe that the vast majority of the people on earth could trace an ancestor back to Abraham. Father Abraham, indeed. Now, let's travel back in time to an age when the sons of Noah still lived to testify of God's deliverance. In those days, much like today, there were many who heard God, some who even listened. But how many truly obeyed? Abram did. He listened, he heard, and then he obeyed. And in doing so, he became a friend of God. Far from perfect, yet willing to follow wherever God led. Abram became the father of God's special people. He didn't know where he was going. God simply said, go, and I will show you. Go, and I will lead your path. And Abram trusted not where he was going, but who was leading him. While others worshipped gods they could see, while others asked what their gods could do for them, Abram simply said, Hineni, here I am, Lord. Abram was bold. Abram was brave. He was strong enough to conquer kings and rescue captives, yet humble enough to kneel in the dust before his God. He had power and wealth, servants and flocks, yet he used his strength to protect, not to dominate. He was not quick to fight nor eager to boast. Instead, he was quick to establish peace. When quarrels came, he was selfless. He gave Lot the choice of land, the greener pastures, the better fields, and he did it without hesitation. That was courage and strength wrapped in humility. God didn't just speak to Abraham. He walked with him. He came to his tent under the trees of Mamre and shared a meal with his friend. Abraham was bold even before God. He dared to stand before the Almighty and plead for Sodom, saying, will not the judge of all the earth do right? God loved that boldness because it came from an honest heart. It wasn't pride, it was compassion. Abraham cared for justice, not just for himself, but also for strangers. Abraham was righteous, not because he followed all the rules, but because he believed. He didn't have perfect faith, but he had a faith that grew, like a seed that God kept watering, for it is written, he believed God and it was counted to him as righteousness. Genesis 15:6. He trusted God, even when he didn't understand his ways. God loved Abraham for his trust because he believed before he saw, and for his humility. He never demanded privilege, though God gave it anyway. For his compassion, he interceded for the undeserving, and for his hospitality, he welcomed in strangers and gave generously. For his loyalty, he walked with God not for a season, but for a lifetime. In the end, Abraham was not perfect. He stumbled, doubted, and feared, but he never stopped returning to God. That's what made him beloved. He wasn't chosen because he was flawless. He was chosen because he was faithful. God found in Abraham something rare, a man who desired friendship more than fame, who believed in a promise over the appearance of things, and who was willing to follow God in faith into the unknown. We must move on now to the main portion, though. And I think this fits together. Abraham's story started something that should still speak to us today. When God said, Lech, lecha, go forth, Abraham didn't ask for the details. He just trusted and obeyed. And generations later, Yeshua stood on a mountainside and called his followers to do the same, to walk by faith, to trust God fully, and to let your light shine before men so they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. Matthew 5, verse 16. That same God who told Abraham, go and I will show you, is the same God who tells us, follow me. What began as a journey of faith in Abraham becomes a way of life in Yeshua. Let's welcome Pastor Jeff as he teaches the Beis Sarah portion, Matthew 5 through 7.
All right. So I encourage you again, come to 1 o'clock. This is going to be a great portion to discuss together and to do it. And it actually fits into today's Matthew when he says, Lech lecha, go forth. Literally, it's go forth like yourself. It's like there is a blessing. I'm going to see that today. There is a blessing. It'll be a blessing for you to go. But you got to go and you've got to do it. And we're going to see that Yeshua teaches us the same thing. There's something about following Yeshua, but we also have an obligation. You said it too. It's obedience. And that's what's the difference. And that's what marks the difference. There's a lot of people, like you said, that hear the word, hear it, but very few that want to apply it, who want to step forth. And this is the difference in that. So we'll be in Matthew. I was teasing him earlier. This is sort of cruel. I got the Matthew 5, 6, and 7 today. That's like getting the Genesis 1 through 6 parasha, okay? For someone who has a 40-minute teaching window, it's torture. Like, where do I begin? Which one do I do? You know, I mean, there's, you could do weeks and weeks, you know, do the Beatitudes, the Lord's Prayer, all the stuff in between. There's so much there, okay? And so, it's like, oh my gosh, where do you even begin? So I'm just going to begin by reading. And I'm usually off the cuff too. I actually had to write notes to keep myself on track because I'll get bogged down in the first two verses. So we're in Matthew chapter 5, 6 and 7 today. Hopefully you've already read the parasha. And again, if you don't know, it's on our website each week. It's in the bulletin. Grab a bulletin back there. If you don't want to go on the website, it's right there so you can start reading it. And for me, it starts reading on Saturday night. And at the end, it's a good way to end your night. Start reading the next portion. And you can usually, even if it's a chapter a day between the Torah and the Torah. So Matthew chapter 5. First of all, let me say the first series, the first teaching 3 weeks ago, basically Matthew was bringing up Yeshua is the son of David. He had to set the standard there that Yeshua is the son of David. He's the expected one. He is the Messiah. He's all of that. Last week was about preparation, the ordination of the Messiah. He's going to begin his ministry. He presents that he's parallel with the priesthood, parallel with that he's going to be. And now we get into the greatest part, I think, is actually the Mashiach, the Messiah himself, the living Word of God, who's been anointed, who has come into his ministry, begins teaching Torah. And he's the living Torah. And I say this again, what I love about Matthew is it's Torah, Torah, Torah. And he's teaching it from, he's the creator of it, he's teaching it. And when we look for Torah teachers, yes, I have people I listen to, I have my favorites also, but our go-to thing should be right here. What does Messiah say about it? How does Messiah teach us to live Torah? And yeah, he's the creator of it, so we want to go right to that. Yeshua brings us to a correct understanding of Torah and its proper application in the light of the kingdom of heaven, not to replace it with something new. And I think we all understand that. He's not coming to teach us something new, to replace it, or he's teaching us how to properly understand the Torah. What is the right application of it? I want to read a note actually from the Bible here. I thought it was pretty good. It says the Sermon on the Mount, which is the first part of this. It says, according to noted Messianic Jewish scholar Arnold Frukenbaum, in its context, the Jewish frame of reference in which it was spoken, the Sermon on the Mount is the Messiah's interpretation of the standard of righteousness which the Torah demanded, put in contrast with some of the Pharisaic interpretations. A better title for this sermon would be the Messiah's interpretation of the righteous of the Torah. Simplistically stated, the difference is between mere external conformity in contrast to internal conformity that naturally lends itself to external conformity to Torah. Doesn't say it's so simple there, but what we're going to see is Yeshua, he doesn't put away the outside, but he deals with the inside. Because the natural thing is when our insides are changed, the reflection shall be that the outside is going to change. And so he deals a lot with this. The religiosity that we sometimes fall into, the religion we fall into, is it's all about outward appearance, outward appearance, outward appearance. And we can look very. But Yeshua is saying, and actually the Tanakh says it too, the outward appearance, that's why he says, I don't want your offerings, all that, if it's yours. If it's just an outward appearance, it means nothing. So Yeshua deals with the inside, with the heart. He deals with that, and he deals with it. And the actual result is when our heart is changed, when our heart is right, there will be a natural outward tendency to be doing the things that we're done. And so he brings us back to that, and we have to be brought back to that. So I'm going to read just a few verses here. It says in chapter 5, verse 1, seeing the crowds, Yeshua walked up the hill. After he sat down, his disciples, his Talmudim, came to him, and he began to speak. This is what he taught them. How blessed are the poor in spirit, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. How blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. How blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the land. How blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. How blessed are those who show mercy, for they will be shown mercy. How blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. How blessed are those who make peace, for they will be called sons of God. How blessed are those who are persecuted because they pursue righteousness, for the kingdom of heaven is there. How blessed are you when people insult you and persecute you, and tell all kinds of vicious lies about you because you follow me. Rejoice, be glad, because your reward in heaven is great. They persecuted the prophets before you in the same way. So I'll stop there for now. So, again, you could we could break each one of these points. This is not going to be a detailed summary of each one of these points, okay? We've done that before. I've done that before, like spent 45 minutes on each one of these points, okay? Because you can break it down. But hopefully you do that. That's what you're to do. Like Jonathan said, you study during the week. Look at these things, dig into it. This is just sort of an overview or something to cap it off. But this is very Hebrewic in a sense. Like for instance, those who come to morning prayers, the first prayer that we do is called Baruch She'amar. And it's blessed is the Lord God. Blessed is he. Blessed is he who creates the earth. Blessed is he who does this. Blessed is he who has mercy on his creatures. And as you read the morning prayers, it says over and over, blessed is he. We say it quite a bit, okay? This is part of it. It's so a very Hebrewic thing here. Some Bibles might say happy. The word comes from Ashrei, which is in Psalms, but it's really about, I should have wrote it down. See, I study a lot of things too, and I forget to write things down, because I like to look at the root of words and stuff. But it has to do with this blessing from Psalms 1, Ashrei, has to do with not so much an outward appearance. That's why happy sometimes in our English language, like, oh, I'm happy because I'm persecuted, it doesn't make sense. But it's an inner contentment. You're blessed, you're happy on the inside because you're willing to do that, you know. And so it's a fantastic word. Go do a study. We have all the tools now. Our modern day, a lot of these tools are used for bad, but you can also now go into Bible Hub, a lot of these things, and it's so nice. You can actually make it a good study time. So just read notes, click on the word blessed, see where it takes you. Where does it begin with? What is the root of it? How does it? Where are all the scriptures read? And it's fantastic when you read about blessed are those who do this and this and this. And it's a big thing. One note here also says, how blessed. The Greek, makorios, corresponds to the Hebrew asher, meaning blessed, happy, and fortunate, all at once. Or no English word is adequate. And that's why you have a different thing. Our blessed, even our happy, doesn't really translate to what it means internally to what this is saying. Psalms 1 brings this up, if you look at that later. A few things about this whole thing. There's two ways you can look at it. I didn't make a chart. It would have been fun to make a chart. But there's 9 linked verses here, okay? Starting in verse 3, that all begin with blessed. Okay? They all begin with the same thing. That links them together, okay? And Tim taught about this at Sukkot, and one of the things he said, and when you see words that are linked together, or the same words or the same theme repeated, it usually means something, okay? There's a connection somehow. So all these 9 verses have it. What's interesting too is the first 8 are in the third person, which is they. Like, how blessed are those? How blessed are those? The 9th one actually changes to the second person. How blessed are you? Okay? Just dwell on that for a little bit. Okay? It changes it to that. The other thing is the chiastic structure of this. And I wish I had a chart, but hopefully everybody knows what a chiastic structure is now, okay? You have the first and the last, and you have something in between, okay? If I had a chart, I could show you, but I'm going to read off here. But if you think about it, the first one is poor in spirit, okay? the kingdom of heaven is theirs. It's linked to the last one, which is persecuted as disciples of Yeshua, great reward. Okay, so that's the front and that's the back. There will be great reward in that. The second one is those who mourn will be comforted. It would be connected to the second to last one, the peacemakers. They'll be called the sons of God. What comfort, what a great comfort to be called the son of God. And then you have those who are gentle, inherit the earth, would be paired up with those who are pure in heart, will see God. And so we'll come back and deal with that, but those who are gentle and those that are pure in heart are linked. But what does that leave in the middle? It leaves those who show mercy have been shown mercy. How blessed are those who show mercy, for they will be shown mercy. What we see here is that the overall emphasis, so we have poor in spirit, we have all of these, mercies at the center. This accords with the overall emphasis on Yeshua's teaching and examples that we're going to see in the book of Matthew. Showing of mercy takes a preeminent position. It is, when we look at all the stories, we look at the things in Matthew he's talking about, mercy. He never negates Torah. He never negates judgment. But mercy is at the very beginning. Mercy is the core of it. Mercy is it. And so we're going to see that throughout the book of Matthew that he displays mercy. And I think Levi understood this completely because he would have been a great receiver of mercy, being a tax collector. For him to be invited in, to be a Talmudim, to be a disciple, he would have had, I think that's why he speaks about it so much, because he received it, and he recognized it, and he knows that. So let's break down a few of these. We're just going to do it real quickly, like not an in-depth study, but so he begins with, first of all, he taught them. They came and they began to speak, and he taught them these attributes of the Torah. And he's got to set up those things of who they are first, that they're blessed, that they're doing this, before he goes on to the other. But he says, how blessed are the poor in spirit. When you look up this word poor, and we just have a word poor, we use it pretty loosely, okay? Because we sometimes say, I say it, sometimes like I'm poor, okay? But I also have a house, I have a car, I've got food, okay? I use this word, I am poor. We use that sometimes, we're poor people. Then there are people who are poor, they'll say, I am poor, and they truly don't have a house, a car, or anything, okay? There's a different material thing there, but we're using the same word. So in the Greek and then in the Hebrew, there's different words, okay? And this one is very interesting. You can look it up. This word poor here is the desperate type of poor. Okay? Not just that I don't have a lot, but it's desperate. And you can find the same word actually in Luke 21:12, speaking of the widow who didn't have anything. Okay? So this is talking about someone who's desperate. They're very poor, they're very desperate. And you can read different commentaries. I do not think this is talking about material, though, because it says here, the poor in spirit. And I'm going to go, because not only is this a chiastic structure, to me it's also a stepping ladder. I think it can be interpreted two different ways. And I'll explain that as we go. It can be a ladder going from one point to another. But those who are poor in spirit, and there's all kinds of scriptures, and because we've got so many chapters today, I didn't write them all down. You do your thing on that. But there's tons of scriptures, especially from David, that talk about being poor in spirits. You have to come to a place. If you come to a place that you recognize in your soul, in your spirit, that you are desperate, that you're poor. For many of us that have been born again, we've experienced this. We're at the lost. I have nothing else. I am lost. I am completely desperate. I have nothing in myself. I'm lost. I'm desperate. I need you. When we come to that point, how blessed we are, because then we inherit the kingdom of heaven. Yeah, it's beautiful. Then we go on to the mourning. Again, there's different views on this. The typical Christian interpretation, I'm not saying it's wrong, or blessed are those who are mournful, be comforted of it, is the dealing with sin. Like if you mourn over your sin so that you'll be comforted or forgiven, and that's true. But I think in this text, there is more of a Hebraic interpretation, because when you look at a lot of the scriptures that's not, it talks about comfort my people, okay? And it does all that. I think we also, when we become born again, we start to mourn over this fallen world. We say this world is fallen, and it brings us sadness. We walk in this world, hopefully we see it. I'll give you an example. After I became born again, I remember, and a lot of you know my testimony, but I went to a club once again. And you can tell my age, by the way, I refer to things by club and the age. Went to a club again, and I remember sitting there, and I went to see, I just had to go, and I went. And I remember sitting there, and for the first time, I'm not saying I had a vision, but my eyes were opened up, and I had the sadness in me, because I've seen people, I've been there so many times and done so many things. I've seen people coming in as friends, and I don't know, I just sat there. And I just seen the lost, the desperate. I knew what was going on as people were drinking, as they're smoking. I looked at the floor, and it was filthy. Like, I don't know how to describe it. It was just full of filth, and people's lives were full of filth. And there was a sadness inside of me that I had been lost inside of that, but then a sadness for the people. That's the type of mourning that I think is just like, oh, if they only knew. They could be delivered like I have been. If they only knew that they look like they're happy. Sometimes they're going off with this or that, they're dancing, they're doing this, but the mourning over their lives. And it's this fallen world. We mourn over the things. And if we mourn over it, we always have this thing that we will be comforted one day. And that's the interpretation I take of it. And then we get into this, how blessed are the meek or the gentle ones, for they inherit the land. This is not, what does it mean to be meek? If you really look it up in the thing, it's the basic definition that the Bible will give is not being overly impressed by a sense of one's importance. Okay? So being humble, being meek is not like, oh, I can't do nothing, I'm humble. Okay? That's not what I mean. God gave you talents, use those talents. We are to use them. We are to use them to glorify God. We're to do that. There are times when we have to take a position of even authority of doing things. But it's recognizing that whatever talent that you have, the difference is it's given to you by God. Okay? That's the thing. It's given to you by God. Yes, you could say, well, I got educated, or I went to school for this, or I've learned that. That's great, but God gave you the ability, one, to be able to go to that school. God gave you the ability to understand what the teacher was saying. God gave you to live, to be able to do that. Does that make sense? So whatever we have, it's God. It's recognizing that God did that. I quote this all the time, but an eagle cannot fly high in the sky and say, look at me, I'm the greatest bird, I fly high. Why? Because that's what it's created to do. Yep. So whatever your talent is, use it to the best of your ability, but a humble person will say, God has given me this talent. And so that keeps us humble. It's only because God can take it away from you tomorrow. You might be a great speaker. God can take away the voice. Yeah, doesn't take it. You might be strong. Strength can go away. Might have a very strong mind. That can go away too. And so it's giving God the thing for that. It's doing that. And it's interesting because it says they'll inherit the land. Okay? And it's like the opposite. Everything in this is the opposite of what the world teaches us. I didn't even go there, but the poor in spirit, let's just be arrogant, right? I can figure out my own way of plan of God, it did that. And we're not to mourn over things. We shouldn't be sad about things. And then we're not supposed to be meek, If you've been in if you work for a corporation, a big corporation, I see this all the time. The way you move up is to stomp the next person down, okay? I mean, that's how it is. I see it all the time. That's the way you do it. I'm going to show you, it's sort of crazy, but I want to show you, I'm going to promote myself and put these people down so I'll be noticed to move up. This is the opposite. Be humble. Promote others. Do it, and then let God do His thing. But they'll inherit the land. Because right now it doesn't even make sense, because who's inheriting the land? Who's buying up all the land? I can't get into politics today, but there's a lot of land being bought by a lot of people that aren't humble, okay? So when you look at this, you're like, wow, People are snatching up land that's in the wrong way of doing things and causing fires and stuff. But then, the Bible says, if you stay humble and all that, we will one day inherit the land. Then we get to this, and then the parallel to that is the peacemakers. This is what I love about the Christ structure. How blessed are the meek, right? And if you go to the peacemakers, which is the parallel to it, how blessed are those who make peace. That is one of our main goals, is to make peace with people. Doesn't mean you have to get along with everybody, you have to do it, but we're to create shalom, to make peace. In order to have peace, you have to be humble. You have to be able to not have the last word in. You have to be able to recognize that, maybe I was right in the sense it's your fault, but I'm not going to project that because I want to have peace. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Humbleness is the key to making peace. Yeah. And I've had unpeace in my life with people because I'd wanted to fight instead of, prove my point. But once you humble yourself and do that, then peace can come. Peace will be is the next part. So that's how we do it. It's interesting that those two go together. And then we have the hunger and thirst. How blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Now get that. In Psalms 42:2 it says, my soul thirsts for God, for the living God. Shall I come and appear? When shall I come and appear before God? And again, you look at those things. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. If we ask ourselves, you hunger and thirst for a lot of things, but how many of us hunger for righteousness? It's a question we have to ask ourselves. One of my favorite books is The Path of the Just, and it's actually a rabbi speaking to his students in the Talmudic class. He talks about they're not bad things. They spend a lot of time understanding oral law, and for us as believers, maybe it's spend a lot of time in end-time prophecy, or a lot of time in word study, a lot of time in whatever. Okay, but how much time do we spend actually asking God to hunger and thirsting for righteousness? We're doing this right. Because sometimes we just take it for granted. We just don't put a lot of emphasis on it. But it should be. We should hunger, God, how do I become right? God, I'm thirst for you. Look at it, says, my soul thirsts for God, for the living God. And that thirst is like a deer. David talked about it that's just dying in a desert, just looking, will go anywhere, You've heard the old thing before. I've heard it before. It really appeals to me. But if you were in the desert and you were thirsty as could be, and you just needed some water, there could be a hamburger stand there, and you're like, I don't want that. I want water, And you bypass all these things because you need water. And how many things do we put in our lives? How many things do we hunger or spend time on, spend a lot of energy on? But one of the things we need to spend energy on is thirsting and searching out God's righteousness, searching out God Himself. And I don't think we do it. I don't do it because it seems so simple. Well, that seems so simple. I got it. No, we don't. If David could cry out like that, if the Psalms could bear that out, then we can too. So we hunger for righteousness. And that's the thing. For righteousness is the main key there. And it says you will be filled. And then we get to this part about mercy. In the middle of that structure, Matthew is very much taken with this concept of mercy. Yeshua regularly teaches on the need to show mercy, and he demonstrates mercy in his actions. And we're going to see that throughout the book of Matthew as we move forward. The concept of mercy, though, is in need of redefining in our times. Okay, we don't have time to go all this, but what do you mean by that? We have a warped sense of mercy, okay, that it sometimes penetrates ours. Being merciful does not mean turning a blind eye to that which needs correction. And you're going to see Yeshua dealing with this, okay? Because today we'll be accused of, there's people in obvious sin. Well, you're not being merciful, just leave, That's not what it's talking about. Yeshua said to the lady at the well, what'd she say? Go and sin no more. He demonstrated mercy, but also did the correction there. So being merciful does not mean turning a blind eye to that which needs correction. Mercy is tied to righteousness and justice. Hand feeding wild animals may on the surface appear to be merciful, but it may cause harm. Mercy needs to be used with wisdom. And you see that. You want to feed the wild animals, right? When people tell you, don't do that. Why? Because, actually you think you're being kind to them. It's the chipmunks they're asking for food, but honestly, it's going to kill them in the long run because they're going to end up, when it gets cold, there's no one out there, they won't be able to do it. We understand it's the same thing with mercy. It's got to be used with wisdom. Yeah. So merciful is not just going on the street handing out money to everybody. That's not what it's speaking about and doing that. Yeshua enjoins upon us here to show mercy to those in genuine need, to those who are, for whatever reason, in great need of forbearance and understanding. They even may be suffering under the consequences of their own sinful choices. But if they are seeking to change and overcome their troubles, they need to be shown mercy. They need a helping hand. So this is where he draws a line. It's merciful is showing, even in sometimes people, they're in bad positions because of what they've done. But when they're willing to change, when they recognize that and they want to come back, we see this through the son, the prodigal son, or the loving father, whatever we want to call that parable. We see it through so many things. This is showing mercy of helping that person at that time in their need when the change is happening. So mercy is at the center of this structure. Then we go on to the pure in heart. Inner purity is the fountain from which righteousness deeds flow. In fact, Psalms 24 says, "Who may ascend to the hill of the Lord? Those with clean hands and a pure heart." So actions and the heart. So they will see God. That's interesting language. They will see God because what does that mean? Because in this, we get to the Torah study in Exodus, they did see God upon the mountain. The language is like that. But no man could see God. But there was a time where they did, and we believe that's through Messiah himself. And then it says, "How blessed are those who make peace, for they shall be called the sons of God." This should be one of our missions, is creating peace. Create peace. Again, it doesn't mean you get along with everybody. We're not all going to be best buddies, but you have to have an atmosphere of peace. And then it says, "How blessed are those who are persecuted because they pursue righteousness, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs." Now, this is a big one because I've been going through this too. Oh, I'm being persecuted, I'm being persecuted, I'm being persecuted. This is specifically, I'm being persecuted because of pursuing righteousness. There's a big difference, okay? Just because someone's screaming at you or this or that, is it because I'm pursuing righteousness? Yeah. A lot of times people are just rude, people are just mean, people are just trying to move up in the world, and it has nothing to do even with our faith. This has particularly to do with pursuing righteousness. Because we pursue righteousness, you will be persecuted since. I'll give you an example. The guy that I told you in my testimony that influenced my life to know Messiah, I persecuted him because of his righteousness. He'd be reading his Bible at lunch, he'd be reading his Bible, and I'd be, "Hey, brother, man, you missed out on a great time this weekend." "No, I'm okay." "You did, man, you're missing out on everything." I persecuted him because he was reading his Bible. I laughed at him, I made fun of him, okay? It was not like a physical persecution, but made fun of him, did all of that. Simply because he was living a standard that actually threw me off, okay? I couldn't understand why somebody would want to be like that. But that was that. And he goes, and then he says, "How blessed are you?" Now it changes to you, it gets personal. "When people insult you and persecute you and tell all kinds of vicious lies about you because you follow me." Again, sometimes people say bad things about us because of things we've done, because of things we've said. That's different than this. This is because you follow me. When we follow Yeshua, when we follow him, when we direct our lives after him, and people insult us or persecute us, you're blessed. It says, "Rejoice, be glad, because your reward in heaven is great. they persecuted the prophets before you in the same way. So it begins this, if you want to put this as a ladder too, it begins with being poor in spirit. We recognize, because you can't be persecuted for following Yeshua if you don't give your life to him before, okay? So this is what I mean by a ladder. We come to a place where we're poor in spirit. We recognize that we're desperate without God. Our spirit is desperate. When we do that, we recognize, we mourn. It could be over our sin, or it could be, like I was referring to, just over the state of the world, over all the things that are so sad and doing it. When we come to that place, we are meek. We become humble. Because we recognize what God's done inside of our lives, and we recognize all the things that are going on. And when we become humble, we can begin to hunger and thirst for righteousness. And when we begin to hunger and thirst for righteousness, guess what the natural result is? We're going to show mercy. Because the more that we're filled with God's righteousness, the more that we hunger and thirst for Him, the more we're in tune with His righteousness, we will automatically show mercy. And when we show mercy, it makes we're pure in our hearts. It's a check on our hearts. It's our hearts going to become pure, and we do all of that. And guess what happens when you show mercy and you have a pure heart? You're going to want to make peace. You're going to want to bring peace. You're going to want there to be peace between who? Between people and God. And when you do that, it's a crazy thing. It sounds so crazy, but when you get to that point where you have a pure heart and you show mercy to people and you want to make them peace, guess what? There will be those who will persecute you. There will be people that will come against it. All those things sound so good, but the reality is the world hates them. And the world don't want nothing to do with them. So when that happens, they're going to come and they're going to persecute. But he gives us this thing, rejoice and be glad. And after that, we're going to go to verse 13 now. He continues on in the Torah and his teaching here. He says, you are salt for the land. But if the salt becomes tasteless, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except being thrown out for people to trample on. You are a light for the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Likewise, when people light a lamp, they don't have cover with a bowl, but they put on a lampstand so that it shines for everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before people so that they may see the good things you do and praise your Father in heaven. So after he gives them these great blessings, it gets very Hebrewic to start off with the blessings. Blessed. Here's the thing going through this. Now that you've heard these things and you understand what it's about, go be that salt. Be the light. We're not to hide it. We're not to shine away from it. There's a calling. There's a blessing in being a person of God. There's a blessing of giving our lives to the Lord. There's a blessing of doing what was lined out here. But it's not just to be blessed. It's to go out into the world. And the world, when I say go out to the world, I have a little different view. I don't think it's always the mission field. There's people called to the mission field. But going out to the world is going to our job. Going out into the world is walking down our street. Going into the world is going to the grocery store. That's the world we live in, okay? So there are people who are called to go to different places. We live in this world, okay? The world that surrounds us. Just look around your block. It's the world, okay? You have to be a light. Are you a light? Are you doing it? He's calling us to stand up and do these things and be that. And people understand that. And then he goes on in verse 17. I think these are key verses. I'm sure everybody here understands these, but it's in the Word of God and Yeshua. But don't think that I have come to abolish the Torah or the prophets. I have not come to abolish, but to complete. Yes, indeed, I tell you that until heaven and earth pass away, not as much as a yud or a stroke will pass from the Torah, not until everything that must happen has happened. So whoever disobeys the least of these mitzvot and teaches others to do so will be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever obeys them and so teaches will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you that unless your righteousness is far greater than that of the Torah teachers and the Parashim, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. These are some of the most interpreted verses in the complete whole of the Messiah. I think we understand that. But he didn't come to abolish the Torah, to do away with it, to put it aside, to do anything. In fact, I don't know how you could even bring that up. He says, I did not come to do that. But our word gets messed up when he says to complete it. Okay? to complete it, to finish it, and it gets misinterpreted. A very basic interpretation of this, because you can't have it both ways. He says, I didn't abolish it, but I come to complete it. And we'll say, well, he means to complete it, you've done away with it. Then he just X'd out his own words. It makes no sense. Really, this is a Hebrewic term that's used many times. It's very interesting. And you can see this in some teachings and some things. If I'm up here interpreting or talking about the Torah and a Torah portion, and I've misrepresented what it says, it would be very well known that someone would say, you're abolishing the Torah. You're abolishing the Torah. Because I misrepresented it. I've messed it up. I've done away with it. If I've interpreted it correctly, gave a good interpretation, someone could say, you have finished it, you have completed it. Which means you gave a good interpretation of it. Does that make sense? And so, our own words, when we interpret Torah, this is why it's dangerous. Actually, it says, be careful if you're teaching. Because we'll be accountable, because by the things that we tell, the way we interpret things, the way we say things, we can abolish the Torah in a sense that we're telling people these things are not legitimate, or this is the way it's interpreted, and we've misrepresented it. In a sense, we've abolished it. But if we're interpreting it right and giving people encouragement and doing all that, we've completed it, we've built it up, we help them to complete it, we help them to finish it, and we do that. I always say it's just like, if I'm fulfilling my, when you say I've fulfilled it, if I'm fulfilling my marriage vows, it doesn't mean it's done, okay? It means I'm doing it. It's an action, it's complete, okay? I hate to say, oh, I've fulfilled my vows and do not do nothing. That'd be insane. So it's completely doing it. And then he says on here, very interesting, that not much as a yud or a stroke will pass from the Torah. There's different interpretations. Some people believe it's little crowns on the things. I have a different interpretation of that because those came about later. But the yud, everybody knows what a yud is. It's the smallest little Hebrew letter, okay? Or a stroke. The stroke, I'll give you an example here. When you say Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Echad ends with a dalit, okay? A dalit has a little stroke on the end. It's basically a resh with a stroke on it, okay? A little teeny stroke. If you take that little stroke off, and it becomes a resh, it would say achar, cher. We would say, instead of one, echad, cher, which means another. By moving that little stroke, we wouldn't say that God is one, we would say that God is another. So, that little stroke, that little teeny piece is very, very important. If it was missed, that's why Torah scrolls are so expensive. Because when they're handwritten, so they have to go through and make sure. Because if you accidentally put that stroke on there and you're reading the Torah, you're going to say, oh, it says right here, God's another. Straight from the Torah. So it has to be precise. Does that make sense? And so Yeshua, how can you deny what he's saying here? He's saying, I'm not even taking away one little stroke of the Torah, not one little thing. In fact, he goes on to say, whoever discloses the least of the commandments and teaches others do so will be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. Now this is interesting too, because it gets into salvational issues. So this, to me, is very comforting in the sense that there are people who aren't maybe teaching or doing everything that's in the Torah, but it's not reflective on their salvation, is why I interpret that. And so it's a very interesting thing on it. But, so he says here, whoever disobeys, so there's something about obedience, but whoever obeys them and so teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. So this is what we're called to do, is to obey them, his commandments, and to teach them. Does that mean everybody's a teacher? Yes, everybody's a teacher. You have a family, you have a neighbor, you have a spouse. We should be teaching whoever where God has called us to be, different people at different places, different things, to be interpreting, to teaching. And this is what we should be teaching is Torah. And that includes Yeshua's words, because he's the living Torah. So obviously, I think we all understand here, Yeshua's not doing away with it. What he's going to do is he's going to complete it by bringing proper interpretation to the Torah. And this is again, when he fights with the Pharisees, when he fights us, he's not doing away with, he's not saying they're bad people, he's not saying that. He's properly interpreting the Torah in his disagreements with them. Because why? In the heart of it, mercy was forgotten. And when do we forget mercy? We forget mercy as a Torah observant congregation. We do want to call us Messianic or Hebrew, whatever it is. We have a reputation of not showing mercy. Yeah. And I'm guilty of that. We have a reputation of being pretty harsh, being very harsh. And we can present, hopefully we can see through Yeshua, we can present the Shabbats, we can present the Moedim, we can present so many things in the Torah that this is what God wants us to do, but show mercy on those who are learning that, who are working through that, who are coming in that way, and showing mercy on those who maybe their halakha, their walk is a little bit different than ours. Not, again, condoning sin, not condoning those kind of things. But we don't have that. We are a very unmerciful people at times. And I challenge, I don't want to point to other company, I point to us. Because we can very, very well be harsh. And I think that's why some have left. Because they say, man, this is just a very, very harsh thing. So let us be merciful. And as the Lord brings people back, as He brings the prodigals back, we have to do what Yeshua does, is show mercy and be kind and bring them back the right way. It is our scripture here, verse 20, that your righteousness exceed those of the Torah teachers and Pharisees. Yeah. Now, he's not talking they were very religious. He's dealing with the heart again. Okay, we're not going to go time-wise. I've got to really hurry here. I told you this is messed up, so really 5, 6, and 7. It's really cool because there's so much, you know. But he gives us some examples. You have heard that our fathers were told, do not murder, and that anyone who commits murder will be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who nurses anger against his brother will be subject to judgment, and that whoever calls his brother you good for nothing will be brought before the Sanhedrin, and whoever says fool incurs the penalty of burning in the fire of Gehenna. So if you are offering your gift at the temple altar, and you remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift where it is by the altar, and go and make peace with your brother. Then come back and offer the gift. If someone sues you, come to terms with him quickly while you are on the way to the court, or he may hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the officer of the court, and you'll be thrown in jail. Yes, indeed, I tell you, you will certainly not get out until you have paid the last penny. So now he's giving them examples. He first sets it up, blessed are if you follow God, you're to be a light to the world. Don't think I'm doing away with the Torah. I'm actually going to give you proper interpretation of it. And now I'm going to give you some examples of where we're headed, what it's to be a disciple of Messiah. I'm going to read one more here. You have heard that our fathers are told do not commit adultery. But I tell you that a man who even looks at a woman with the purpose of lusting after has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye makes you sin, gouge it out and throw it away. Better that you should lose one part of you rather than have your whole body thrown into Gehenna. And if your right hand makes you sin, cut it off and throw it away. Better that you should lose one part of you than have your whole body thrown into Gehenna. So now he gets serious. First of all, he's talking about this, hey, do not murder. Because some people could say, I don't murder. I have never murdered anybody. I can honestly say, I've never murdered anybody. Okay? That's great. I've never committed adultery. Man, I'm righteous. But Yeshua says a little bit stronger here, though. You got a problem with your brother? Have you called your brother a fool? Have you done that? Maybe in that category. Have you looked at someone, in the wrong way? Now that changes the game. Now I stand before God guilty. And this is what Yeshua is saying, to be a disciple of Him is a high calling. It's not just the external religious aspects of it. Those are part of it. We should do the outside, but He's dealing with the inside. And that's usually where we don't want to go. It's actually easier to just look good on the outside. It's the inside where he wants to dwell and where He wants to do it. And so He's given practical examples of how we do that. Let's see, I'm going to go down. Let's just go down to now this whole thing about your right hand, left hand, hopefully understands he's not talking about the physical cutting off. This is a terminology used in the Torah It's the same thing when someone does something, it says, break their arm. It's not talking literally about, if I poke out your eye, you come and poke out my eye. Now we got two people with no eyes. That's not what he's talking about. It's fair compensation, okay? Here he's given the same type of terminology. I know there's a fancy word for it, I don't know how to say it, but he's going to the extreme. Think about that. He's going to the extreme. Like if your right hand or your eyes cause you to lust, get rid of your eyes. That's pretty extreme. If your right hand is causing you, just cut it off. He's not talking literally because that ain't going to help. Because you're still going to have those thoughts, okay? But he's saying go to the extreme. This is serious business. Go to the extreme to take care of your hearts. Let's go down. He gives examples about loving each other, caring for each other. Let's go down to chapter 6. I'm just going to read a few verses here. Be careful not to parade your acts of tzedakah in front of people in order to be seen by them. Some could say charity. If you do, you have no reward for your Father in heaven. So when you do tzedakah, don't announce it with trumpets to win people's praise, like the hypocrites in the synagogues and on the streets. Yes, I tell you, they have the reward already. But you, when you do tzedakah, when you do charity, don't even let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Then your charity will be in secret, and your Father who sees what you do in secret will reward you. So if you understand, if you go to Edersheim's and stuff, they actually have these things that look like trumpets in the temple area. In fact, even this Bible talks about it. I didn't realize that. It says, for giving alms. There was 13 collection boxes for alms at the temple. They were wide at the bottom and narrow at the top and resembled trumpets. These boxes made a recognizable sound as the coins were dropped into them, and often those who wished to boast would drop a large number of coins in at once. This was called sounding the trumpet. It was this practice of letting everyone know how much they were giving that Yeshua opposed. So if you can see him standing there, these teenage disciples, don't get caught up in that. Don't get caught up in that. It's not that. When you pray, don't be like the hypocrites who love to pray standing in the synagogues and on street corners so that people can see them. Yes, I tell you that they have the reward already. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father in secret. Now again, he's going to tell us, this doesn't mean you can't come up and pray in front of people, okay? He's not going there. We see but he's saying you have to elevate your health. You have to elevate yourself. Why? It doesn't mean you can't tell people when you're giving. Sometimes we have to tell people when we're giving something, okay? We have to make it known that someone has a need. So you got to look at the whole Word of God. There are times that. What he's saying is evaluate your heart. Why am I giving this? Is it to elevate myself? Is it so that I get the glory? Is it to make myself look good? Why am I doing a prayer? Why do I want to go up and do a prayer? Why do I want to do that? Is it for me so people see me? So he's evaluating the heart, and we have to evaluate the heart. Yeah. I say the same with the tzitzits. We have to ask ourselves, why do we wear these things? If it becomes just so people see me or I fit into the thing, then that's a problem. Yeah. And sometimes I take one sometimes because if my heart ain't right on it, I don't do it, And so you have to, it's all about the heart. So Yeshua's calling us to a great example. And then he gives us here, I'm not going to read this, but in verses, he gives an example of a prayer. Which is our Father in heaven. This is sort of based off of, some people say off the Kaddish, which we did today. It begins with the same type of language, okay? Our Father in heaven, may your name be kept holy, may your kingdom come, and will be done on earth as in heaven. And so he gives us an example of a prayer. Again, doing that. It's beautiful. And then verse 14, for if you forgive others their offenses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you not forgive other their offenses, your heavenly Father will not forgive you. Forgiveness is key. It's key to peace. Again, forgiving someone doesn't mean that you're their best friend later, okay? Doesn't mean that, but we have to let go. We have to forgive. Yeah, even if they don't forgive us, we have to forgive. Yeah, because it's what the Father tells us to do. He talks about fasting here. He talks about in verse 19, do not store up for yourselves wealth here on earth. Doesn't mean, again, that you can't have wealth here on earth. You got to look at the whole Bible. People misinterpret this. You'll have to be poor to be followed of Yeshua. No, he had wealthy people who followed him also. Okay? Abraham was wealthy. Okay? He's not saying that. It's where your heart is. It's where your heart is is everything banked on here? He says, store for yourselves wealth in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and burglars not break in or steal. For where your wealth is, there your heart will be also. So he says, why does God give me wealth? Why does God give it? What is the intent of it? And do I give God the glory for it? That's what it's for. It's about that. He says here, for where your wealth is, your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. So if you have a good eye, and I love the way that is if you are generous. That's the general interpretation, a good eye. For your whole body will be full of light. But if you have an evil eye, your whole body will be full of darkness. And the general interpretation of this is, if you have a good eye, you notice people's needs. You notice, you do that. If you have an evil eye, it's like, I don't want to see it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to be involved. I just stay out of the way. I don't want to listen to you as you're talking to me. I don't want to hear about anything because I don't want to be involved. Does that make sense? Then he tells us, don't worry about our life. In verse 25, will you eat or drink, or about your body? And basically he says, because life is about serving God. To me, this resembles Ecclesiastes that you read in Sukkot. He's sort of saying the thing like, all these things are fine and dandy. Don't worry about them. Just serve God. Be happy. Enjoy your life and serve God. Otherwise, it's pretty much all useless. And so you see that. I'm going to go all the way to 7. I'm going to close on this. And then we're going to close with a song, a pre-recorded song for Gadol Elohai. But I'm going to jump all the way down to verse 24 in verse 21, chapter 7. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. Only those who do what my Father in heaven wants. On that day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, didn't we prophesy in your name? Didn't we expel demons in your name? Didn't we perform miracles in your name? Then I will tell them to their faces, I never knew you. Get away from me, you workers of lawlessness. That is, to me, a very scary scripture. He's talking about people who actually call him Lord, who actually profess it, but they're not living for him. It's just like with Abraham, like John said earlier, you can say you heard the word of God, you can say that, and Yeshua's going to deal with it in this book. You can call your son a son of Abraham, but if you're not living it, it means nothing. And that's really a scary thing. Can you imagine living your life on this earth being just religious, just doing these things, thinking, okay, and then here, I never knew you, you workers of lawlessness? That's the opposite of Torah, okay? He's getting serious. And so he concludes with this. So everyone who hears these words of mine, after he spoke all these things to the people there, I mean, can you imagine sitting and he's talking about this? He's dealing with your heart. He's just tearing into it. So everyone who hears these words of mine and acts on them will be like a sensible man who built his house on bedrock. The rain fell, the rivers flooded, the winds blew and beat against that house, but it didn't collapse because its foundation was on rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act on them will be like a stupid man who built his house on sand. The rain fell, the rivers flooded, the wind blew and beat against that house, and it collapsed, and its collapse was horrendous. So it tells us in life, we're all going to have floods, we're all going to have water, but the difference is, many of us all hear the word of the Master, but the difference is those who act on it and those who don't act on it. And this is what he's teaching. After he teaches all that, we can read all that. I mean, what a challenge for the people that were there. He teaches all of this, and he says, okay, it boils down to this. You've all heard what I said? You all call me Lord. Now go out and do. Be obedient, do these things. And this is, and we've been lied to that, oh, you can't do good stuff. You can't do all that because it's all about grace. No, we do good stuff because we have found grace. Now, what do? If we're getting rid of sin, lawlessness in our life, we have to replace it with something. Refuse evil and do good. And he saved us that we might turn from evil and to do good. So anyway, I know that was long today, and I apologize. There's so much here. But I think the root of it, as we go through Matthew, is showing mercy, understanding that he's teaching Torah. If you haven't been living for him, get back on the ladder, get back into it, get back up, and follow him. Yeah. And ask Him, and we always ask, Lord, change my heart. And as God is changing our hearts, all of our hearts, as God is working on all of us, on our rough edges, on our hearts, we need to show each other mercy through that. Yeah. Because we don't know what other people are going through sometimes. God's working on each one of us as we do it. Sometimes we clash a little bit. We bump into each other, because God's working on us. And we have to show mercy through that. And pray for the person. Pray for him. So we're going to close with the Gadol Elohai. And then after that, Jonathan and his family will come and say the Kiddush. And then we'll have Oneg. And then don't forget 1 o'clock, Torah study down the hall.